Hi, moms and dads, boys and girls. My name is Brian Kusko. Have you guys ever seen a python before? Before we get started on this video, I wanted to let you know that this video was recorded in partnership with the County of San Luis Obispo Public Library and for the Foundation for the San Luis Obispo Public Library. So, if you've watched these videos before, then you may have seen a python. But if you haven't watched any of these videos yet, I highly recommend going back to video 1, starting at the beginning, because there's lots of cool information about reptiles and amphibians and other cold-blooded creatures that you may have missed. And I highly recommend you go back and look at it. So, about my question about a python. You see that big box back there? There is a python in that box. I'm going to go get it now and show you guys. Yes, this is a python. Played a little trick on you probably there, didn't I? Probably expecting something huge and enormous to come flying out of that box. Well, I did play a little bit of a trick, but this is a python. Most people think of pythons as giant, huge snakes, which some are, but not all pythons are the same size. And this could also be a good lesson to remember not to judge a book by its cover. And you may have heard that phrase before. It's a common phrase, and what it really means is just because something appears one way on the outside, you may have thought a giant python was coming out of that box, but it's just this little snake right here, whose name is Lucky, and Lucky is a children's python. And Lucky actually got the name Lucky because she was part of an experiment or a science study over at Cal Poly, and it was supposed to be a study about how they eat, but for whatever reason she wasn't eating the way that they would like her to for the study, and they ended up having to even feed her scrambled eggs, which I thought was very interesting. I'd never heard of a snake eating scrambled eggs before, but that's what Lucky was eating, but it wasn't working for their study, so she was going to be moving on to brain surgery. But luckily one of the grad students there said, "Hey Brian, do you want to take this snake so she doesn't have to go to brain surgery?" And I was like, "Yeah, I will do that. That sounds much better for her to come here and teach kids about how cool snakes are rather than have brain surgery." So Lucky the children's python. And one thing about children's pythons is that you may think they got this name, children's python, because they're very small and child-sized pythons. However, the truth is that the person who found these snakes in the wild, which these snakes are from Australia, his last name was Children. And so that's why it's called a children's python. I always thought it was just because it was a smaller python, which makes sense if you think about it. But the truth is, yes, it was actually just named after the guy that discovered them there in Australia. So, there was a giant python in that box. I wasn't completely pulling your tails or yanking your leg, whatever that phrase is. This is Halo. Halo is a reticulated python, and I've had her since she was just a little baby. She used to fit in the palm of my hands just like this. Reticulated pythons are the longest species of snake on the planet, and they live in Southeast Asian countries and places like the Philippines, Indonesia, and it's basically all over Southeast Asia. And she's a big snake. She's quite a handful, but she's also a very gentle giant. I've spent a lot of time working with Halo to get her to be as gentle as she is, and she's actually never struck at anybody. Some of these snakes, the largest I've heard of in captivity, have reached feet about 23 feet long, and I've seen some snakes of these that are like in the 200 plus pound range. Halo's not quite that big or heavy. She's actually closer to about 15 feet long and probably sitting somewhere around 70 to 80 pounds. So can you imagine that snakes can get much bigger than this? Actually, I do have one other reticulated python that you may have seen crawling around in one of these enclosures back here in all of these videos. That's actually bigger than this. I'm going to take her out too. But first, I wanted to point out this thing about Halo, the reticulated python, which is that she has all kinds of different genetic and pattern mutations going on. So she's an albino, and she's got some other things called tiger and motley that make her look like this, because this is not what a reticulated python would look like in the wild. In fact, I do have one here that looks like it would in the wild, and I'm going to show you that too, just so you can see, so you know where the name reticulated python comes from. Now this here is Elvis, and he looks a lot more like what a reticulated python would look like in the wild. And they get that name reticulated python because of the pattern that's along their back. You can see it, the way it kind of intertwines, these black parts especially, the way they kind of go in and around. It's called a net-like pattern, which reticulated means net-like. There's actually an animal called a reticulated giraffe that has a similar pattern. So that's where these guys get the name reticulated python, is from that net-like pattern. Now Elvis here was an animal that I rescued from somebody who wasn't quite ready for a snake like this yet and decided that they had just got him and they didn't want him because it was a bit much snake for them. So that's one point I'd like to make, is if you guys are ever thinking about getting a snake or any kind of animal for a pet for that matter, make sure you're really ready and do lots of research to find out what it is this animal requires and kind of what you can expect from having an animal like this, because Elvis here could easily last and live for about 25 years or more. That's a long time to dedicate yourself to keeping a pet. So just something to keep in mind. Elvis here is also full grown. He's a male, which the males do get smaller, and this is true of most python species. The males stay smaller than the females. But he's also from an island locality, so he's what's known as a super dwarf reticulated python. So obviously much smaller than Halo back there, but still a reticulated python. Ooh, I told you I had a snake that was bigger than Halo. This is her. Oh, it's a lot of snake. This is Betsy Ross, and she is a purple albino reticulated python. You can see she has that same kind of patterning as Elvis had, but she's a purple albino, so she's got a lot lighter colored skin. Okay, we're taking the whole table with us. This is a very powerful, strong snake. Snakes are mostly muscle, and they're very, very strong. And luckily, Betsy Ross here is much like Halo in that she's a very gentle snake. And even as gentle as she is, she's very strong and powerful and a very, very cool animal to be able to hang out and work with. But reticulated pythons kind of go where they want to. Oh, I'd kind of like to give you guys a little teaser into the next video, which is a different type of python. It's a little easier to handle than one of these guys. Ball python, much easier to handle. Much less work to wrangle, and even not just the size. These guys like to stay in their little ball. You've seen a ball python before if you've watched all the videos, like I recommended that you did. But the reason I wanted to show you the snake and give you a little sneak peek in the next video is because I'm pretty excited about what the next video is going to be. Let me show you. Here, this is a clutch, and yes, it's called a clutch of snake eggs, and these are ball python eggs. As soon as I get this little top off for you guys. Cover it in plastic to keep the humidity in. Check that out. Now these eggs are slated to hatch in the next couple weeks here. So our next video, we're going to be showing these snakes hatching and coming out of the eggs and the baby snakes. So that'll be a fun video for next time. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video with all the big snakes. Halo, the reticulated python, Betsy Ross, the reticulated python, and Elvis, the super dwarf reticulated python. Please do me a favor and have a conversation with a friend or with your parents and talk about something you learned today so that you can really help drive that knowledge home into your brain. And you guys have yourselves a great day.